The first is learning, how I actually learned, how I got my materials, how I actually did things in class, all of that. The second is how I got around the campus, because obviously it was a big place. And the third is how I socialized and met people and tried to have a bit of a uni life, because that's part of it as well. Hello and welcome to the Blindseyepodcast, the podcast discussing everything you did and didn't want to know about being blind. My name is Connor, and this week I thought we would talk about university. So I actually got a question from somebody about university and if I would talk about my experience with it and not being able to see and all that's kind of involved. So I thought I would do that. As always, before we get going, if you like what I do, please consider subscribing, liking, share, following, telling somebody. That always helps. And yeah, let's get cracking. All right, so when it comes to university, there's three different aspects, I guess, I wanted to talk about. So the first is learning, how I actually learned, how I got my materials, how I actually did things in class, all of that. The second is how I got around the campus, because obviously it was a big place. And the third is how I socialized and met people and tried to have a bit of a uni life, because that's part of it as well. All right, so I went to uni and I got given what was called a note taker, which was this lady who was there to help me in lectures and tutorials to take notes, especially if I couldn't take them quickly enough myself. I tried the whole dictaphone thing, but it just wasn't good enough. So she would assist me. She was provided by the university, and that was really cool. And I had her, and she would help me in, my classes or my lectures or anything like that. But the other thing that also happened was the disability office of the university and the tutors said, the earlier you get in touch with us, the better, because then we can tell you what books you need for each semester, and that'll give you a lot of time, because the lady who was assisting me, she might need a couple of weeks to actually format and scan all the pages for all the readings, which is an hours-long intensive thing. So sometimes you might have 60 pages a week or something like that just for one class that you might need to read. And she would actually have to scan each of those 60 pages in by hand and then get them to me in a way that then I could read them in time to be able to take it all in. So that was how it was supposed to work in theory, but in practice, that's not how it actually worked. And it didn't work for a couple of reasons. One reason is that sometimes the lecturers and tutors and stuff, they don't actually have the book that they're going to use for the semester down pat until a couple of weeks before term actually starts. So for everybody else, not that for everybody else that's easy, but for everybody else, all I have to do is pick up a book and it's there. But in my case, I needed to know the book, so then it could be scanned for me, and you might have a 300-400 page book, so you can't just scan it all. So you'd have to try and work out, what do I need scanned earlier than others? What's coming up in the first couple of weeks of semester, yada, yada, yada. So if the teachers don't actually know yet what they're going to work on, or they haven't finalized it, then that's a little bit of a problem. The other option was actually going to the publishing houses of the books that you were given, assuming you knew the book titles by then, and trying to get a PDF version of the entire book, so that I could just search through that myself. But then for some reason we came in encountering all these copyright issues, because the university wanted to make sure that I wasn't going to do anything dodgy with it, and the publishing houses wanted to make sure I wasn't going to do anything dodgy with it. And as an avenue supposedly to get around the troubles, it was actually just another layer of trouble. And it wasn't any quicker, it was actually much slower. So in my very first semester, I actually got my readings in a format that I could read them in week 10 of 14. And I had an exam in week 14. So for the first 10 weeks, I was basically operating on just lecture material alone, having been in the lecture, memorized as much as I can, and been given some lecture notes by my note taker. But as far as the actual readings in books came, I didn't get them until week 10, which, as you can imagine, is a massive problem. And none of that was really helped by the fact that what I was studying had a lot of several 100-year-old text to read. So it was in a different kind of old style English, like Elizabethan English. And it was also about the French Revolution. So it would sporadically break into French. And my screen reader, JAWS, isn't good at reading old-timey English, and it's not good at reading French, and I don't know French. So that just kind of added to what was going on. So eventually I had to actually change majors by the end of that first semester because I needed to study something a bit more 21st century, because it meant that the actual reading materials would be 21st century and therefore a little less cumbersome to try and get my hands on quickly. The ironic thing of all this is that the university actually had a disability liaison officer and they had all these procedures in place, but the procedures weren't really practical or working as quickly as they needed to in order for me to keep up with my learnings and keep up with each week's topic. So I basically had to cut the this disability unit out of the process, which is the ultimate irony because they were supposed to be there to kind of help, but it was just more hassle than it was worth or for what it was giving me in return. It also basically became a situation where it took so much effort to try and just get the readings and try and just get the source material that by the time I actually got it, I found it very hard to put my head down and knuckle down and try and learn it well. So it became just a thing of, well, that'll do, that'll have to do, because it was just never straightforward. It wasn't, here's your readings in a timely manner, read them this week. You know, sometimes I did get that a couple of years in after I started, but particularly in the beginning, it was just so exhausting and troublesome trying to get just to an even keel that I had very little energy to actually try very hard. So I'm kind of amazed in the end that I ended up getting a credit average. I suppose I probably could have gotten better, but yeah, it was just a matter of kind of energy and my own internal resources to be able to just deal with that. Basically, how we got around it is the note taker lady and myself, we just saw the flaws in the system and worked it out between ourselves and dealt with the tutors or the lecturers who could see the same issues. So we kind of had an under the table agreement for certain things, and it wasn't proper. It wasn't following the procedures of the university or anything like that, but the proper procedures were more trouble than they were worth. So it meant that I had to kind of go around their back and just talk to lecturers and tutors and say, hey, like, what can you give me? How soon can you give it to me? And yeah, so thankfully that kind of worked to a point, but it's just a shame that that's what it basically came to. So because of all of that, I was only really able to study part-time because the university wasn't able to provide enough resources to me in a timely enough manner for me to be able to study full-time. Because even with the part-time load, I was still finding it very hard to get my readings quick enough for each week. So if I had 4 classes a week instead of 2, then there would have been 2 extra classes and a couple of 100 pages more for my note taker assistant to have to try and trawl through to get to me. So unfortunately, that turned a 3-year course into a 6-year course, which is fine in hindsight, but that's just the nature of what it had to be because that's the way the setup was. Okay, so part 2 and getting around. So getting around the university was interesting. It's quite a sprawling campus. A motorway cuts between the two sections of it. And thankfully, I was mostly in one place, but you would have moments where you'd need to duck over to the other and you'd have to jump on the shuttle bus. And all this was at a time when I was 20, 21, where I still wasn't very confident with the cane. I was kind of afraid to use the cane. I was afraid I'd be a sitting duck for somebody to attack me, or I'd be afraid I'd look different and nobody would want anything to do with me. And my own psychology when it came to using the cane and independence just wasn't there. I could use it technically and I knew how to walk around and stuff, but I had a mental block in terms of actually trying to do it and feel comfortable, feel safe, and not feel like a bit of an outcast doing it. And obviously, each 14 weeks, you change classrooms, you're in a different classroom that maybe you've never been in before. And in 6 years of learning there's no way I was in every single classroom. So every 14 weeks, you're having to get an instructor out to say, okay, how do I get to this class? I get to this class. Okay, how do I get into this lecture hall that has 300 seats in it and stairs? Okay, I do it like this. So those are the kinds of things you had to try and get your head around. And eventually I did get there once I became a bit more comfortable in my surroundings, but that's what was involved. What it did mean, however, was that for the first couple of years, I would get assistance to class from this lady who was my note taker. And that was really great. And I really appreciate everything she did for me. But in hindsight, it probably cramped my style a little bit, which is not her fault. I was asking her to help me, but I was kind of torn between wanting to be independent, but then being scared of what that entailed. But then at the same time, I'm walking into class and sitting next to a senior citizen who's helping me out. And that's not any disrespect to her, but that's just the nature of what it is. And I'm surrounded by 18, 19, 20, 21-year-olds. So that probably didn't really help the next part, which is the socializing and interacting with other people, because some people would go, well, some people are more comfortable with that kind of setup than others. Let's just say that. And finally, now that I mention it, when it comes to socializing was, again, sort of similar to the learning. It started off slowly and then eventually got there towards the end of my time at uni. So socializing was hard, particularly in the beginning, because you're in a new place, you're in a new learning setting, and I'd walk into class and I'd never know who was sitting next to me because it's an adult environment. There isn't really the same amount of mingling. People are taken off. Some people don't do the same classes as you, or that's the only class they do that is the same as you, or you're studying something that hundreds of other people on campus are studying at the same time. So it can be very hard when you can't see them to recognize them, to know where they are in a room. If I'm walking into a room and then you don't want to say to the person who's with you, who's helping you out, hey, would you mind putting me next to that guy that I spoke to last week? I don't remember his name. Or, hey, that girl that I was speaking to last week sounds cool. Would you mind plonking me next to her? So, it's not really ideal, and it makes it hard because also at that age, I'm not the only person that has confidence issues. And some people are much more readily available to say, hey, what are you doing? How are you? What's happening? Whereas when you're 18, 19, 20, and you're only just out of high school or whatever, then there's a little bit of that, I'm sure, for everybody else going, who are these people? I'd love to say hello, but I'm a little bit nervous about it. So everybody just keeps their mouth shut. And yeah, I just think a thing for me was, it was kind of lingering issues from high school. It was assuming university was going to be the same as high school, assuming people didn't actually want to talk to me or didn't know how to talk to me. And then I would kind of get in my own head and wouldn't give me the confidence to be able to put myself out there, because I was always second guessing myself and what people must be thinking, which I don't know if they're actually thinking or not, but that's just what was happening. The particular thing as well about my university or my campus is, it's not like American Pie. It's not like college movies from the States where in America or in other parts of the world, you're actively encouraged to stay on campus, build networks, have a social life. And at least that wasn't my experience of my campus. It was more like, hey, you've done your class. Unless you live here, go home. We don't really want you lingering. We don't want you loitering around. So as soon as class would finish, everyone would just rack off. And there wasn't really a lot of on-campus events, or at least not enough, I didn't feel, to kind of build any of that sort of campus life. Not in the structured way that maybe it happens in other parts of the world, or the way it's maybe perceived in other parts of the world through media or TV or movies or whatever it might be. So that was a bit of a shame, because sometimes those more structured events give you an opportunity to do something that maybe you're finding it hard to do yourself. Eventually, though, when I was there, they started running bar nights, and they do one bar night every couple of months. So it wasn't anything ongoing or miraculous or great, because they didn't really want us drinking on campus either. But they would do a bar night every couple of months, and it would run from 7 until midnight. So again, not very late. But I started attending those, and I was terrified too, because I didn't know if I'd know anybody. But again, I was kind of at the point where I didn't want to leave uni not having really made any friends, or not experienced the social side of university as well as the learning side. So I started going to the bar nights, and I actually met friends and I met people. And sadly, a bit of alcohol works everyone's tongue loose, and you find out people will say, oh, I've actually been meaning to talk to you, but I never knew how to. And, now, surprise, surprise, I'm full of drink and I can speak to you now. So that was kind of nice, even though you wish it didn't take that. And I wish I didn't take that for myself to be able to break the ice. But there's a reason why they call it Dutch courage, and there's a reason why alcohol exists in a lot of social settings, because it greases the wheels. So that was cool. The only thing, was I would get a lot of cases of people coming up to me at 11 o'clock and say, hey, I wanted to say something earlier on, but I wasn't drunk enough and now I am. And then you'd have an hour to actually chat with that person. Whereas I try to explain, look, there's nothing to be afraid of. So please don't be afraid to approach me. Like, you don't have to be drunk in order to approach me. I'm not going to bite. I welcome meeting any new people. So again, it was nice, but it was like, oh, cool. I've sort of been sitting here mostly on my own for a couple of hours, but now that you're pissed enough, you're happy to chat with me. So I was glad at a chat and stuff, but it's just a shame that that's what it took. The other thing that I started doing at uni and outside of uni, but particularly at uni, was I started wearing funky t-shirts and sort of things to catch the eye, which wasn't at the time really my style, to try and break the ice for maybe people who wanted to approach but didn't know how to approach. Because sometimes when you have a disability, there are people who they might like to say something, but they don't know how to. They don't want to offend you. So all that nervousness turns into, well, I don't know how to say it, so I won't say anything, and I will never say anything. So what I used to do was wear interesting band t-shirts. I love funky band t-shirts to kind of make people think or whatever. And I ended up getting this t-shirt made up that said, how about a blind date? And my whole point was really showing myself, look, I'm not taking myself too seriously. So there's really no need for you to act like you need to be on eggshells around me. I'm just a guy. I'm open to being approached, and I can laugh at myself and I can have a joke. And for the most part, that really worked. The last two parts of the socializing of uni was, one, I did eventually join a club, which took me a while to get there and find one that worked for me. But I found a club and I met a few people through that, and we had a mutual interest. And that was really good because you had a one-on-one setting where you'd get together, and we had a little bit of a Facebook group or something like that. So in the midst of people changing every 14 weeks, even if we weren't all together, there was still that commonality and that contact, and actually made some friends who I still have now. And yeah, I don't see them as much as others, but they're probably the closest I came to having long-lasting friends from uni. So I'm really glad that that's actually what happened. The other thing that happened was at some of those bar nights is I met the residents who live on campus, and they were a mad lot. So once they started inviting me to their parties and their gatherings and stuff, then things really got interesting, which I was really grateful for, because they were doing things that I kind of was hoping I'd get from uni, and it was just a good way to meet new people, get more involved in kind of the social aspect of things, not have to just wait for a bar night that happens every couple of months, because they might be doing something every week. So yeah, once I met them, it really kind of sort of just livened things up a little bit, and like I didn't end up making any long-term friends out of them or anything like that, but it was that part of uni life that I wanted and expected. So eventually I got there. So yeah, basically that's my rundown of how I did uni. A lot of people crap on what I studied because it's not seen as job ready enough, because for some reason education is supposedly only useful if it's good for jobs. But it worked for me, and I ended up finding 2 jobs now that are useful for it. So if nothing else, my study kind of I learned things academically, but I also learned things sort of personally, because I found my own feet a bit more as an adult, and I was able to learn how to do like critical thinking skills, which are good academically and good sort of to be able to apply in a work setting. But it also meant that I was able to think about myself differently, think about maybe some of the experiences I had had in high school differently, think about my nervousness about being okay with my own blindness and interacting with other people differently. So again, yeah, some people want to crap on the arts and all that kind of stuff, but for me, it helped me become much more well-rounded personally, but it also did give me a lot of skills that now I've been able to take into the workforce. But so yeah, just had to get that one in there, because people do like to shit on it. So anyway, I hope that was interesting. As always, you can get in touch with me by emailing blindseyepodcast@gmail.com. That's BLINDSEYE podcast@gmail.com. I'm on Facebook and Instagram if you search for Blindseye Podcast, and I'm on Twitter @BlindseyePod. And if you just want one place for it all, just go to blindseyepodcast.com, and I'll be back with a new episode in a fortnight. Cheers.